What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. We have a few scary Reddit stories today. I hope you guys do enjoy these stories, and let me know what you want to see next. Let me know what you guys want to hear, and yeah, let's get right into it. The neighbor who almost ended up killing me. 2 years ago, I moved to the UK for university, as I always wanted to go there and get away from my parents because my situation at home was becoming a little too toxic. In my first year at uni, I moved into the student accommodation and I met some really great people. It was a good year without meeting my boyfriend, who I'm still with, and just enjoying my time away from family and discovering what independence truly meant. Anyhow, as the second year came by, I decided with some friends to move into a house rented by the student accommodations. At least we had found our own house and we weren't as restricted, with noise and parties as we were living in a small, room the other year. I had neighbors on each side of the new house, so we were surrounded by families and some other student accommodations. The neighbors on the right of us were 5 boys, who looked way over the age of being at university. The boys were very strange, and I had met one of them outside one day because there was some kind of police intervention going on, because I guess he had gotten attacked by his roommate and he was holding a kitchen knife or something. I heard some screams, so I went outside with my, roommates, and I saw one of them covered in blood with cuts everywhere and a wound on his head that was obviously caused by the kitchen knife. Me and my roommates had no idea what to do, so we decided to go outside and help him get cleaned out of his bloody clothes and hand him an old t-shirt that we had laying around. We saw the guy who hurt him being escorted out by the police and into a van to be arrested, I guess. I don't know anything more about the story, but the police didn't really tell us anything. They seemed to leave out a lot of information. Anyway, the guy we helped was really weird. He said a lot of BS, and he kept trying to grab me and kept flirting with me. We kinda assumed this guy was out of his mind because he did smoke a lot of weed and was always doing drugs. I didn't really care in the moment, so we just wanted to make sure he was okay, and I kinda forgot about the whole flirting idea. After some time had passed, I would go to uni and I would come back home and see him quite often in the street. I never said a word to him. But one day he came up to me in the street while I went to the corner shop, and he started talking to me weirdly, and I didn't feel comfortable at all with him for some reason, so I just decided not to respond to him. He then just said, "Oh, that's okay. I'll just wait in front of your house then, and I guess we can talk later." No need to say, I was absolutely creeped out, and I thought he was joking, so I bought my drink at the shop and I decided to head back down the street. As I turned down the street and to go to my house, I saw him. He was standing there, sitting on my doorstep, waiting for me. I panicked and went back to the corner shop, and I called my only guy roommate to ask him to open the door and, tell the guys to leave. But obviously, he of course wasn't home, and no one else was home either. So I literally just waited out until they left an hour later, and I decided to sprint back home and lock the front door. After this already pretty scary encounter, I just tried to avoid the guy at all costs, and it was mostly successful for a long time. But then one day, as I went to smoke in the backyard, I noticed that the wooden door, which was always closed, was open, and the strings that were there to keep it closed were cut off. For whatever reason, I didn't think anything of it, and I just closed the door again and put a new string on it, thinking it was one of my roommates who took the bins out and just didn't tie it back. The neighbors would often scream and yell, and they would fight in their house. It would wake me and my roommates up in the middle of the night, but we kinda got used to it after a long time. One evening while my boyfriend was sleeping over, he heard a loud bang and a noise that woke him up in the middle of the night. He never wakes up to anything, and he's one of the hardest sleepers I know in the entire world. I was sound asleep, so he silently woke me up, and we both just waited in the dark and listened for any other noises. Suddenly we heard the wooden door just bang, just shut open, and some footsteps right next to my window. I always had my window open because it would get really warm inside, so we both just froze and didn't move. We heard the door leading to the backyard get shaken softly, as if they were trying to get inside of our house, and they suddenly stopped. Luckily, we had the curtains closed so they couldn't see inside, but we were ready to get dressed and get the hell out of the room and lock them if they came in from the window. Then we just heard some window move and get more open, and one of the guys saying something in a different language that we couldn't understand. And we kind of began to hear them get in, but they're struggling to, get in the window. My boyfriend and I just shot up out of the bed, took my phone, put clothes on, and ran out of the room and out of the house, so I called my roommates for them to lock themselves in the room so we can wait till the police would come. I don't remember anything after the police came, and I think me and my boyfriend were still in shock. They ended up catching the guy, and the other was, fled and was later found a few streets up smoking weed. The police told us they went inside of the house and they found a lot of meth and heroin, and they were carrying a massive kitchen knife with them when they broke into our house. I was so confused as I've never done anything to offend or do anything wrong to my neighbors, so the idea of them breaking in with God knows what intentions with a kitchen knife absolutely terrorized me and my boyfriend. The two guys ended up being arrested, and one of them was put in prison for 2 years for carrying a weapon with intention to harm. I never heard anything else from the police, and I moved back home a few months later as I was scared, and it honestly tormented me for months on end, not knowing what could have happened if me and my boyfriend didn't wake up. I'm still now coping with it, and I find it really tough to get over it, as I'm always kind of asking myself, what if this happened, and what would have happened if they got in? I now very often wake up at the slightest noise, and I get horrible nightmares because of this. But hey, at least I'm still with my boyfriend, and we often talk about it, which, seems to help and ease the pain. The stalking neighbor and coworker. In the summer of 2017, I was working at a pharmacy. I had been there for 4 years, and a new staff pharmacist around my age, 28 at the time, was hired. He seemed odd, but I was nice to him because everyone else was rude to him, and I immediately felt bad. He asked me way too many questions, some I answered and others crossed boundaries, questioned about my ex-boyfriends, etc. Fast forward a month, he said he was moving. He lived on the east side of my city, and he said he was moving to the west side where I live. He said that he actually found a house near the intersection of where I live. I asked him what street, and he wouldn't tell me. He also said that the owner will live there for a few months or so I decided to forget about it. Fast forward a few months later, and my mom and stepdad told me that they met our new neighbor. Our house is one of the houses that faces away from the intersecting street. This house is on the intersecting street, so we are one house away, but the backyards connect. My mom said he seemed like a really nice young man. The next time I worked with him, I asked if that was him, and he said no. Then another time, he started asking me questions, describing my backyard, and asking if my street name started with the letter that it did. So he ended up admitting that it was him who lived next to me. I asked him how he knew it was my house, and he said he saw me in the backyard. He decided not to say anything to me, I guess, because he didn't want to seem weird. The next few months were even weirder though. I was still friendly with him as a coworker, but he crossed some boundaries. He knew my birthday was coming up, and my birthday and address are in the pharmacy database, and my brother was asking for ideas for what to get me. I wanted a certain phone case, so I was browsing on my phone to send to my brother the links to the ones I wanted. He would always look over my shoulder when I was on my phone, so he saw me type the phone case, and he ended up deciding to get me that phone case with a $150 preloaded Visa card. It seemed kinda weird because he was my coworker, and we never had really any relation at all. I told him in a very professional manner that I felt like the gift was inappropriate and probably against the company's policy. I walked over to his mailbox while he was at work to return it. He kept putting it back in my mailbox with messages of him begging me to accept it because I make him so happy. I ended up giving away, but obviously he never knew this. Not much longer after that, I took my coworker, not him, a female, to the zoo. I had some of it on my Snapchat story. He kept messaging me on Snapchat asking questions about it, and it was bothering me, so I blocked him like any regular person would do. After that, he called my mother. I guess he got my number from when they first met, and he told her that he needed to talk to me. He told her that he needed to come over and talk to her, so she invited him in and they talked. I was very alarmed by this, but she thought it was endearing. I told him once again at work that he crossed boundaries, and he said that he does everything that he does because he cares about me. He didn't understand where I was coming from at all. Those were the most standout things he had done. Also a lot of pestering about tell me who your boyfriend is and trying to look at pictures in my phone to figure it out, going through coworkers' phones and reading their conversations with me, even impersonating them while I was not at work to get their info. One time he even concerned me at work and he wouldn't let me leave until I told him what the characteristics are that I look for in a guy. He was also mad at me when I got a birth control prescription filled, even though it was being used to correct hormonal problems from another birth control I was on. I started being mean to him at work because I couldn't take it anymore. He then told me that I was treating him that way because he's a nice guy and who cares about me, and that I guess I'm looking for a jerk in a man. It became a very hostile work environment, and I left about 2 months later. This is a side note, other coworkers and neighbors hate him because he likes to start confrontations. He also plays he said, she said with people for entertainment. The neighbors have called the police on him and they think he's pretty crazy. I haven't heard from him at all since leaving, but I saw my former coworker last week at a get-together and she said that he is trying to get her to tell him where I work now. He told her that he sees me getting into my car every morning, so he knows I have a job. I told my mom this and she didn't take it seriously. She never really believed I was in danger anyway. I would just like to get out, an outside perspective. When I come home late, I run to the door, and if no one is home, I will wait to take a shower. I'm still scared. The one experience that scarred me though was when I was getting out of my car one night coming home from work, and he was waiting around the corner to see where me coming home. The second I pulled up and, checked to see if everything was clear, he hopped out of his car, which was parked around the block, and he decided to run up to me as I was trying to unlock the door. Thankfully, I ran inside and I told my dad, this guy is trying, what is he trying to do to me? And they ended up calling the cops and he ended up getting arrested. He still stalks me from time to time and he figured out where I work, so I'm always paranoid that, this guy's gonna kidnap me or this guy has some weird obsession with me. I don't know how he's still my neighbor, but I rarely see him, but when I do, he's in an upstairs room looking at me through his window. I was someone who loved to tan in my backyard, but I can't do it anymore because anytime I go outside, he's always waiting there looking for me. I don't know what to do, and I feel like I'm still being stalked. I get random numbers that call me late at night, and I am just in constant worry of what this man's gonna do to me. Hopefully you guys can help me out and let me know how you feel, because I've never had a stalker experience like this before. The basement light. I moved into a small, quiet neighborhood just outside of Chicago a couple years ago. It was one of those older suburban areas where everyone kept to themselves but still smiled and waved. My house was a modest single story with a decent sized yard, perfect for my dog Max and me. I was just happy to have a place that I could finally call my own. A week after I moved in, I started noticing something quite odd about my neighbor, Mr. Grayson. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, who lived alone in a house directly across the street. He kept to himself mostly, but there was something unsettling about him. At first I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way he'd stand in his driveway staring at my house, or the fact that his basement light was for some reason always on. One night I was sitting in my living room alone watching TV when my dog started growling lowly. His gaze started to fixate on the front window. I walked over to see what had caught his attention, and I saw Mr. Grayson standing in his driveway, just staring again. This time he was looking directly at my window. I waved awkwardly, but he didn't move. He just kept on staring, and after a few seconds I decided to close the blinds and shake it off. He might have just been an old lonely man, and I didn't want to make any judgments too quick. Over the next few weeks the staring continued. Sometimes I'd catch him peeking from behind his curtains watching me as I moved through the lawn or I took out the trash. Other times he'd just be outside standing there, and it was always at night. The strangest part though was that basement light. It was never off and it would flicker occasionally, casting an eerie kind of glow across the front of his house. One evening I decided to take Max for a walk, thinking, some fresh air would clear my head about this whole situation. As I passed his house, my dog started barking uncontrollably. He's usually a friendly dog, and he acted like he had seen a ghost or something. I glanced over and I saw Mr. Grayson's face pressed against the window. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was opening like he was trying to tell me something. That's when I noticed it. The basement window was slightly open. I'd never seen it open before, and something about it felt wrong. I hurried back home, and that night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I heard a faint sound. It was like a tapping or something. I got up to see what it was, and I realized that it was coming from outside. I looked through the window and I saw Mr. Grayson standing in his driveway, but this time he was holding a hammer. He was tapping the hammer against his palm over and over, and he was just looking at my house. I locked all the doors and windows to make sure that nothing weird was gonna happen. I remembered that basement light was on, so I peeked through the blinds to see if it had been turned off. The next morning, I decided to go confront him about it. I walked over to his house and I rang the doorbell. No answer, so I decided to ring again and again, but nothing ended up happening. Then I noticed the door slightly open as I turned my back. It was Mr. Grayson. The house was dark and it smelled pretty gross. I could hear a faint dripping sound coming from somewhere. I stepped inside as he invited me in, and I had to adjust to the dim light. I made my way to the basement floor, and my hands were shaking as I pushed open the door to get down there. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw a figure slumped against the wall. It was him. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide open. He wasn't moving at all. There was a pool of dark blood around him, and I realized that he had injured himself or something. His hands were covered with the blood, and the hammer was laying right next to him. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet, and I decided to ring 911. When the police arrived, they told me that Mr. Grayson had been dead for days now. They found no signs of forced entry, no interaction, or no foul play. The night before, he was standing outside with that hammer watching me, so I have no idea how they said he died a few days ago. That light is still on to this day, and it kind of makes me feel suspicious, like there was some paranormal activity at their house. I don't know if I was, going through something, but how could I have seen him the night before? It was also weird because the police report ended up not even being public data, and I still try to find it to this day, and I can't. I hope anyone who's listening to this understands how weird of a situation this was, and I hope you guys never have to experience anything like this in your entire life. Hopefully you guys did enjoy these scary Reddit stories. Let me know what you guys want to see down below, and make sure to drop some support because these videos take a while to come out with. Thank you guys. Peace.